Welcome to the Starfish Diaries. I am your host, Liz McKean, and you might have found me from another podcast or from yoga or through coaching or maybe a recovery event, but all that matters is that you're here now, and I am so glad that you're here. On this show, we're going to be talking about identity and self-trust and recovering from all sorts of things, including shame and burnout and squeezing ourselves into what we think good looks like. And I'm going to use a lot of metaphors because that's how I make sense of the world. And I'm hoping that helps you too. I'm really just here to remind you and honestly remind us that there is no such thing as doing life wrong and that you do get to make your life into a place that you want to be. And we're going to figure it out together. So let's go. Happy Friday, if you're listening when this comes out, and welcome back. I'm so happy to just see you in my little mind's eye and in my heart. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that I'm here. It's finally a rainy fall day here in upstate New York, and we've had this little gift of a extended summer. I think if you live in the Northeast, you've probably experienced it too, and it's been just wonderful. And also it's come at a little bit of a cost because that sunshine and dry air instead of the rain that is kind of typical for this time of year, I think that's made the trees kind of let go of their leaves a little faster. We're not seeing the color in the same way that we usually would this time of year. So, you know, there's two sides to every coin, as they say, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I don't have any control over, so I'm just going to enjoy what is in front of me. And right now, I'm coming off of a few weeks of beautiful weather. Today is rainy and it smells like leaves. I know that the rain is needed and it feels cozy, and I have a candle lit. And I'm usually a hot beverage girl all year round, especially during cozy season, but I have a new affinity for iced Americanos. So that's what I'm sipping on. So I hope you're sipping on something that is delightful. And I also would love to take some sips of oxygen with you. I know there's more than just oxygen in the air, but we're not scientists here, at least not today, at least not in this moment. So get comfortable wherever you are, even if you are driving or, you know, carrying laundry around or whatever you're doing when you're listening to this podcast. Just allow maybe just your shoulders to drop a little bit, maybe your jaw to unclench a little bit if you're a clencher like I am. Maybe if you're picking at your cuticles furtively like I also am, then maybe we stop that for a minute just to allow a little bit of softness in. And then when you're ready, take a really big breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Good. And one more. Big breath in. Longer breath out. Yeah, and then just let your breath settle back into whatever feels comfortable. And maybe that's all you needed today. And if you want to chat some more, that's what I'm here for. So if you are joining me here for the first time, I'm thrilled. If you've been here for the last, 10 or 11 episodes, I'm also thrilled. If either of those things are true and you're enjoying what you're hearing, I would be so delighted if you would hit subscribe and or rate, review on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. That is just the thing that gets the podcasts out there. It's like currency for podcasts. I mean, when currency itself isn't available to show people that this is something worth listening to. So if you would do that, I'd be really grateful. And just the fact that you're here, I'm also incredibly grateful for. So today, I want to do a little bit of I guess it's kind of a part 2 from the episode about asking for help. And I've given this a lot of thought over the past several years, but recently I've just been noticing ways that I ask for help that are so very different than even a year ago, how I would ask for help. So I think it's such a nuanced conversation, right? Because I think there's an enormous amount of courage in saying, I can't do this alone. And it also requires a lot of self-trust to look for the help that you know is going to be supportive in your life, and trust yourself to still be part of the discussion, part of the conversation, part of the decision-making process. I'm just thinking of the times when I was younger. I guess I'll just focus because I've talked about, recovery and addiction here. When, there was a good decade of starts and stops before I really found what I consider my recovery. But that was all really part of it. That's why I don't count days. I don't even really use the word sober anymore. I certainly abstain from alcohol, and I intend to always do so because it brings really nothing good to my life anymore. But to discount those years and years and years that were, again, starts and stops, would be such a disservice to all the work that I did then and all the brave requests for help that I made then. But I think the reason I'm bringing this up is because the difference between the way I ask for help now and the way I asked for help then is layered. And the most obvious piece of that is desperation, right? Like when if you've ever experienced, I think most of us have experienced desperation, but if you've experienced it in the context of substance use, when you're realizing that you're doing a thing over and over and over again, and this actually might not even be a substance, but you're doing a thing, you have a behavior that is hurting you, and yet you continue to do it, right? And it's this wild feeling of promising yourself again and again that you're going to make a change, mixed with other days where you are rationalizing to yourself why you don't need to make a change, maybe rationalizing to others too. And then there's moments when you see yourself like as if you're outside of yourself, doing the thing, like going to the store, buying the bottle, pouring it, and just being like, no good will come of this, but also there's part of the brain that has been activated, or maybe and part that's been deactivated, that is just like, this is the only thing that matters right now. And we're just going to shut up the part that is saying this is bad news, because there is this like just reptilian need for this thing for survival that is incorrect, but also so strong. And then the cycle continues, right? And there's a level of desperation there when it's like, I can't control this thing in my head, and I don't even know if all of me is convinced I want to, and also I'm going to die and I've lost everything, or I'm losing everything, and it's a type of fear that I think is really unique and painful. And to ask for help during that moment is incredibly courageous, is incredibly scary, is incredibly like tender and vulnerable. Like the actual ask, of course, you're being vulnerable by asking, but the ask itself is vulnerable because you put it out into the world. And if it is not received in a way that is like pretty immediate and also feels safe, it will self-destruct, essentially. Like I can't count the amount of times that I would say, I need help with this, I'm scared. And someone would, with fully good intentions, this is not at all anyone having done anything wrong, but someone would be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let me take your hand and we're going to do this. I'm going to take control. I'm going to make this decision for you, or I'm going to sit here and force you to do it this way, and it would be like, retreat, abort mission, like, gotta go, and just be like, never mind. I would rather, honestly, in those moments, I'd be like, I would rather die doing this thing than give up my control of my life overall. And that would ebb and flow. There'd be times that it would be like, I would rather give up control than die, and it's amazing the mental gymnastics that you go through, and emotional gymnastics. And that ask for help is a very unique one. And there is still that element of needing to have self-trust to ask for help, because there's a lot going on in your head when that's happening, right? There's a lot going on. And again, this is, for me, I'm speaking about my experience with alcohol, but I've also had this experience in other areas that have just felt a little less intense. This is just the most dramatic version of it for me. But I have a history of issues with disordered eating, I've had, I mean, even something as simple as like procrastination, like when I was seeking out a diagnosis for ADHD, I've had moments where I was having panic attacks. There's a lot of different times I was like, this is a problem. Even, money, like, oh my God, I'm in debt. Like I need help. And in that moment where you're like, there's so much going on in my head, there is a part of me that is just like, wants somebody else to just take over. There's another part of me that is telling me, don't tell anyone that this is a problem. Again, whether it's the money thing or there's usually some shame kind of wrapped up in whatever this is. If you've experienced this, stay with me. And to ask for help then is having to choose which part of you to trust, because there's all these different parts. They all think they have your best, they all have good intentions, like the part of me that wanted to go get the bottle was like, this is the thing you need to survive. I'm convinced of this. We will die if we don't have this alcohol. Or like, if we die, that's honestly worth it because the other version is even worse. And if somebody finds out, then they're going to make us stop. And then there's other part in my head that's just like, please, somebody make me stop, And you have to decide which one of those you're going to trust, because that's the one that's going to ask for help. And that's a really scary, vulnerable thing, because once the words are out, it's hard to take them back. And when you're in that desperate moment, when you're in that tender moment, you also are putting an enormous amount of trust in somebody who you're asking. And often, because it is a desperate moment, there's not a lot of room, because all that stuff's going on in your head, to be kind of discriminating about who you're asking. I'm not in a place that I'm going to be able to do a lot of research about the therapist or the program or the, whatever. It's just that moment comes, the door is cracked open. I got to ask the person in front of me. I got to ask whoever's the easiest to get to. I got to ask whoever I can afford to see, if it's a clinical situation. And it doesn't always go well, because there is a lot of voices in your head. You're having to make a choice. There is, a chance that person that you're asking might not know what you uniquely need. Again, it doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong, but they just aren't going to probably have all the information. You don't even have all the information. There is just, it's a very, like, we are just all trying to keep our head above water right now. And even just explaining that, even just like putting words to that experience that I don't think I ever have. I don't think I've ever talked about that. Like, I feel really emotional right now because I've talked about recovery and all these things on 1,000 different podcasts and stages, and even just, one-on-one conversations. But that battle is something that I don't think I've ever put words to. And I think it's because all those parts of me still exist. And up until relatively recently, I don't think they all had a seat at the table in a way that felt useful and visible. And that's why how I ask for help now is so wildly different. Because in the past, it's like I have to choose one. I'm imagining like all these different parts of me in my head, and this is just the way that I imagine it. You might imagine this very differently. You probably do, because we all are very different. But I'm imagining all these different parts, like the part that thinks like, I got to get a quick fix. Like discomfort is intolerable. I need to fix it, whether that's with, something that I'm going to put in my body, a type of food, a type of substance or whatever, or I don't know, I guess that's usually the case for me. Then there's also this other part that's like, here are these other ways that we can solve this problem. There's other parts that are just like, actually, I don't have time for this problem right now because we are in charge of these other areas of life. There's the panicking part of me. There's the general anxiety part of me. There is the, people pleaser part of me. Then there are also like many very, very strong, even those parts are strong, but like there's many, many like parts that there's just so many that honestly, like I feel like it's got to be multiple tables. I'm picturing like a high school cafeteria. And in the past, I had to choose one or the other. I tried to eliminate some of them, and that was a crappy feeling. And now I'm at a place that everybody gets to show up, and everybody has a job. Even the part of me that is like, holy crap, it's an emergency, we need to get something, it has a much bigger toolbox now. A bottle is no longer the option. A bottle actually is like, a broken tool that we put away in the shed that like, we know is there. And I'm hoping we don't ever open that shed. That's the plan. And honestly, this part is so strongly determined to make things better that part knowing that tool actually makes things worse, like knowing like, you know, makes it a healthier part, because now there's still moments of like, oh my God, this is intolerable, I need to feel better. But that might be, I gotta go. Maybe it's I gotta go for a walk. Maybe it's I gotta take a nap. Maybe it's I gotta light a candle or put on a cozy sweater or call my mom, or, you know, just shut off all the lights and be in a room and quiet for a little while. Like, there are things, there are tools, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a super healthy one, but it's not one that's going to kill me anymore. And that's fantastic. So that part gets to be at the table. And that's just made it so much easier, because now when I ask for help, it's a group decision, and there's room to be just a little more. The only word I can think of right now is discriminating, but I feel like the word discrimination can be kind of like, you know, that's not how I'm using that word. Do we all know that? Do we all know that the word discriminating can just mean like I'm actually like taking a lot of things into account. I, you know that I need somebody that has these qualifications or whatever. That's how I'm using that word. There's a better word that I can't think of, but I'll think of it later, probably at 3:00 in the morning, and I'll be so mad. Anywho, so now when I ask for help, I trust me. And I trust me to know that there's nobody at this table that has the answer, or we just don't totally agree, so we would like another voice, and I'm going to figure out the best person to ask outside of this table of Liz. And that's life-changing, because that means when I go to somebody and say, hey, I need some help with this. I'd love some feedback, or I'd love your support, or maybe I'd love to give you money for coaching or therapy or a fitness program or something, and they say, cool, this is what I have. First of all, I probably wouldn't have asked them at all if I didn't have a pretty good idea that there was a match there. But if they say, this is what I have, and I'm like, ooh, well, you know, that program includes some things that are actually kind of bad for me. Like, I know that, you know, it doesn't mean they're bad for other people, but I will say, oh, cool. All right, well, never mind. Thanks. That's not a fix. That's not a fit. Or, you know, if I was to see a doctor, you know, or a therapist or something, and we had a conversation, and, you know, they wanted to say, you know, we're going to work really hard for these however many weeks on taking deep breaths and meditating. I'm going to teach you how to do that. And I was like, well, I have those tools. And it's not that I don't need more of that. I feel like I always do, but also that's not what I'm here for. And if that's the only thing you have to offer me, then that's not what I want to pay you for. So even when it comes to people I love, you know, people in my life, there are times that I want something only my mom can give me. You know, I want to just be able to be with my mom and feel like, you know, that love, that very specific kind of love is the medicine that I need. And then there's times that I want to talk to my husband because I need someone who's just going to be like, you're great, you know, like you're great and you're right and you do good things and you're smart. And like, that's fantastic. And then there's other times that I want to call up one of my several friends who are like forever entrepreneurs, who are creative, who are just, you know, brilliant and excited. And I can be like, I want to build this thing. And if I brought that to my mom, if I brought that to my husband, they'd be like, cool, we believe in you. We don't get it, you know, like that's not what we do. But these people, these friends, they get it. And they'll like brainstorm with me and they'll give me feedback that will be helpful. And they also are people that I have in my life because they could give me feedback that was not helpful. And I could be like, that's not helpful. And they will still be my friends, you know? And there's just this inner trust that comes with the ask for help that is so necessary in order for that help to be incredibly efficient and incredibly impactful. And I like to think that that's what people can find when they come to me too. For the people that know me, they know, you know, what I have to offer. And also I was going to say careful enough, but that's not quite the right word. We're just not in a real great vocabulary place today, but we're just going to keep on keeping on. I'm just going to go with careful enough that if somebody comes to me, I'm not going to immediately like just deluge them with advice or feedback or something. Like, you know, that's not necessarily what somebody needs. And I think that's what makes me good at what I do. The reason that I'm doing this podcast is because I am coaching now, and you may or may not know me. And if you don't, this is a great way to have an understanding of who I am, what I have to offer, the vibe that I have, the tone of voice that I have. That's even important, you know? And if you come to me, you can come with that like kind of discriminating palette where you know that, you know, if you're coming to me to figure out how to I don't even know. What could you come to me for that I would absolutely not be able to help you with? I don't know. If you want to come to me for like marriage counseling, that's probably not my jam. Not because I don't have a wonderful marriage, but because that's just not the thing that I'm offering. That's not the thing I'm talking about. But the things I'm talking about here on this podcast are things that I feel really good about, that I've done for myself and have worked on with other people. And therefore, if you came to me, you would know that that's an area of somewhat expertise that I have. And also, hopefully you know that if you were to come to me and we would have a conversation and you would say, I need help with this, you could trust me to say, cool, let me recommend someone because I'm not the person for you. Or maybe I would say, this is what I can do. And you could say, you know, I had a talk with all my inner parts here and we don't think you're the guy for the job. And I'd be like, that's cool. I still like you. And we would be fine. Or maybe it would be a match made in heaven. But all of those scenarios require that inner, you know, trust, and knowing that you know what's best for you. And that is the life that I live in right now. And that is so great. And I don't get it right all the time. And, you know, it's not always an immediate knowing of what is, you know, the next step to take. But I want to start talking about that more on this podcast, because I think, you know, the more I drop episodes of just, you know, it's really just been kind of a get to know me show so far. Like, here's a thought that I have on this. Here's a cool dragonfly fact. I feel like, you know, the reason for this show is, again, for you to get to know me, hopefully get something out of this, hopefully walk away thinking a little bit more maybe compassionately or critically of how you are working through whatever scenario is going on in your life. And, you know, maybe at some point that means that we work together in a more direct way, and maybe not. Maybe this is just the tool that you need, is just to hear somebody's voice while you're taking your dog for a walk or doing your dishes. I listen to lots of podcasts like that, but I want it to be useful. And I feel like I need to define what that usefulness even means to me in order to get there. So I think we're going to stop there today. Next week, I want to continue this conversation and talk about some specific help that I am getting right now, like areas, things that I am working on personally in ways that my kind of inner wisdom and inner roundtable has been able to find ways to get some support for things that maybe don't even seem like they match with, you know, past experiences. But I want to work through like what that decision-making process was, because I think that is helpful, because it's helpful for me when other people talk about those kinds of things. So I want to talk about that as it relates to recovery. I want to talk about that as it relates to food and body. I want to talk about that as it relates to mental health. And then we'll expand from there. But those are kind of the three areas that I feel like are coming up. And yeah, and if there's other areas that you have in mind that would be helpful to hear about, I would love to hear from you. So I know I've said this before, and I always link it in the show notes, but right now the best way to get to me is through Instagram. You know, I'm not super posty on Instagram quite yet. That's gonna change, so stay tuned. But it is a place that I am every day, and I'm delighted when I get DMs, and I'm always excited to have those conversations there. So at Starfish Yoga is what that handle is. But yeah, stick around, because I feel like there's some cool conversations to be had. And if you're in a place in your life where you feel like there's just like, you know, stuff that maybe you want to shift a little bit, maybe a little help that you need. And again, it doesn't have to have anything to do with me, but ways that you want to make your life more of a place you want to be, and you're not sure how to get there, and you're not sure what it would take to get there. Maybe there's a little bit of shame around needing help to get there. That's kind of the direction that I see this going. And there's more to come on, again, ways to work potentially with me. And I'm always happy to share resources because I'm fortunate to be surrounded by people and organizations that do incredible work. And it is a delight to be able to point people in their direction. So reach out if you need anything, want anything. Again, please hit that subscribe button, because that way you won't miss an episode. You'll get a notification when it pops up, whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google. Does Google still have podcasts? I don't know. Amazon. The cool thing about doing podcasts these days is you host it in a place, if you do it the way I do it, and you're able to essentially submit it to all the different places. So, the only place I don't spend a ton of time is YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this is probably a super bad way to get up there in the algorithm, is to say this out loud. But, here we are. We don't hide things here. Again, Instagram is the place to reach me to actually chat. But I hope you stick around. I hope you hang out. I hope you take deep breaths with me. And on that note, let's do it. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you're able to relax one little teeny tiny muscle, maybe it's an eyebrow, maybe it's a pinky toe. I don't know how you go about relaxing one pinky toe, but if you figured out, let me know, because I've had many a yoga teacher say that. Now here I am saying it. So give yourself that gift of just one little iota of muscle softening. Enjoy the gentle music that my wonderful producer, Sean, again, has helped me with, because he is a wonderful musician himself. He's linked in the show notes too if you want to do your own podcast. And then when you're ready, we're just going to find a big old breath in through the nose. So find that big breath, fill up. Maybe hold at the top, feel those ribs expand, and exhale out of your mouth, let it go. Yeah, take that again. Big breath in through your nose, fill up. Exhale out of your mouth. Good job. Take one more. Big breath in through your nose. We're going to hold it at the top. Hold. Feel that expansion. Let it go. Make some noise. Hell yeah. So grateful for you. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Starfish Diaries. I want to take a quick moment to thank some of the people who have made this possible. The artwork that I am so in love with is by my friend and the most talented artist, Mo Houston, and you can find her and her work and work with her by going to Joy Scout Studios. I will have that linked in the show notes. And thank you to my incredible editor, Sean Gritters. If you are looking for production support with your podcast, highly recommend that you check him out. His information will also be in the description.